Good afternoon. Welcome to my channel. On this channel, I've done a variety of various different videos as of late. I have um, my podcast channel, which I do a majority of my work from. But I've used this one more for just some personal videos here as of late. And yesterday, I kind of got home from a long day of work and I was just kind of thumbing through my social media stuff, was on Facebook, and came across a exchange in a group that I'm a part of. And I see a lot of this kind of stuff come through, but this one grabbed my attention. And as I was reading through it, I just thought, this is what I'm reading from this person who kind of attacked another individual in the group that I'm a part of. They're kind of messaging, the tone, the way that they were going about it, was everything that I have fought against in the last probably 5 years of my career in education. And the more I kept reading through it, the more I kept thinking, I have to respond to this. And of course, the exchange in the group was quite long. And as I was reading through it, different things kept kind of coming into mind. And I thought, any attempt to try to put a written response to this is just going to be futile, in my opinion, in terms of trying to write it out on social media. Keeping it within the confines of the group that I'm a part of, it might have been well received. But I think this message needs to be heard not only by those who are a part of that group, but those who subscribe to my channel and follow my work in general. And so again, I just want to give a little bit of quick background on this, and then I'll kind of jump into the actual responses that I read from this educator on the group feed that was posted last night. So for those who aren't familiar with my work, haven't followed along very much with what I've done, I'm a non-traditional teacher. I got an undergrad degree in marketing from Butler University. I worked in sales and advertising for about 5 years before I decided to make a jump into education. And so I entered into a program at IUPUI called Transition to Teaching. Many schools have programs similar for working adults who are interested in obtaining a career in education. And so I had initially gone to Butler as a history major, decided that I would teach social studies. So I spent the first year at IUPUI completing undergrad work that I needed to have to satisfy the state's requirements for being acknowledged as a social studies teacher here in Indiana. You have to have 3 content areas on your license to teach social studies. So that could be government, econ, U.S. history, world history, civilizations, geography. There's many other aspects to that. So I got that. And then the second year, I then focused on my method, what would be like methods for undergrad and grad level courses. And so, then I jumped into education, right? And I started teaching. And I have relatives who have spent their career in education. So I kind of knew a little bit about what was going on. This would have been in the mid 2000s. I believe my first year in the classroom was the 2007-2008 school year. And so, I kind of knew what to expect. I kind of knew what was going on a little bit, teacher training through the program that I was a part of, prepared a little bit for that. But it was so methods based. It was so ideological. There wasn't much reality to what it would be like in the classroom. That was kind of one of those things that you had to figure out on your own as you got into it. So I started teaching, and I really enjoyed it. I was kind of bright-eyed, optimistic, think that I could have a major impact on students. And the first couple of years went pretty well. And then, I kind of started to get jaded a little bit. I really got to see firsthand in the first 4 years that I was in the classroom what schooling was doing to our children. And the more I started reflecting on things that I was a part of, the lessons that I was teaching, the daily grind during the school year, and whatnot, again, I just started to become more jaded to the point where I started thinking there's got to be a better way. This cannot be the best way that we have come up with as a society to attempt to educate our children. And I don't even really remember how I came about doing it or who put me into contact. I could have stumbled across it in some readings that I was doing online, but I came across a guy by the name of John Taylor Gatto, along with some other connections that I had started to make through Facebook groups that I was a part of. I've shared this before in the past. One of the other major influences on my thinking as it's developed here is Carrie McDonald, who has done a great job of advocating for alternatives to education, and many, many others as well. Dr. Peter Gray, who's a fantastic mind. But really, it was Gatto in particular. And I dove into two of his books, Weapons of Mass Instruction and Dumbing Us Down. And I just connected with it. I was reading what he was saying. And this is a guy, if you're not familiar with John Taylor Gatto, he's deceased, God rest his soul. Phenomenal teacher, taught in some of the most, undesirable conditions that anybody could think of, inner city New York, over his career, which I can't remember off the top of my head how many years it spanned. But just, he was New York State Teacher of the Year. He was New York City Teacher of the Year. He was a language arts instructor. Just did some phenomenal work with these students. But he came to realize that as a part of the schooling system in America, the harm that he was doing, being a part of that, he himself obviously wasn't doing this, but being complicit in being a part of it was something that he could no longer live with. And so he famously wrote a resignation letter, which I believe he published as an op-ed. It was published in some way, I believe, in the Wall Street Journal, and I think it probably got reprinted in other areas as well. But then he went on to just kind of tell his story, and through his books, he really deconstructed and built his research on what compulsory-based schooling looks like in America, the roots of it, the impact that it's had. And again, that was the impetus for my book that I wrote, Failure, the History and Results of America's School System. I self-published this on Amazon a little over a year ago. I'm currently working on a second book titled Let Down: How Schools Marginalize Our Most Vulnerable Children. And in that book, I'm taking various different groups in our society through race and ethnicity and even through socioeconomic status, and attempting to highlight just how poor the school system is for these children. And so, obviously being an educator, being on the inside and having these convictions, it's not openly well received, right, from a lot of people inside the system. And I spent the last couple of years of my career in public school openly, touting these ideas. And it finally just got to a point where I could no longer do it. And I think I've explained this as well, that really the straw that broke the camel's back for me was the SEL work that we were doing in the school that I was in. And in particular, and the reason why I'm going through all this is I think this really will help set the stage for what I'm about to say as I address these comments from this educator here is, we got into a situation in the school system that I was in where we started pushing social emotional learning. And those who are familiar with this know a little bit about what it means, what it is. Those who are proponents of it in the public school system will talk about it in terms of educating the whole child. That this is beyond teaching them the curriculum, that this is all about teaching them how to mature as individuals, how to acclimate into society, and what they base this off of, and the justification that they get for doing this, right? Because this is a very key thing that I'll talk a little bit about here in just a moment is, the fact that so many children come into schools today with baggage, right? And that I'm not disputing that at all. You'll never hear me try to say, hey, little Johnny, he's got a perfect home life. He's got it the same as all of these other kids. Look, I'm the first to acknowledge and know from experience that students come into your class with all kinds of different, lifestyles, baggage, whatever you want to call it. And it is sad. It's heartbreaking. I've had students break down in tears in my classroom telling me about their home life, telling me about, the situation that they have in their relationship with their parents or lack of relationship. I've had homeless students. I've had students that have been evicted in the middle of the night, that have had to move from place to place. Parents are in jail. Parents are drug addicts. Anything that you can imagine. I've heard those stories before. The question, and this is what is super important, this is where I want to start to transition to talking a little bit about the reaction that I have to this individual, and I'm going to set that up here in just a little bit, is what right and role does the school system have in trying to correct that? I guess that's the word I'll use, or to try to address it. I'll just put it that way. I'm not necessarily saying that their objectives are to correct people, because I think there are some hardcore people in education that would say, no, you don't correct these behaviors. And there's even some people who will tell you this about, for example, things like autism, or any other issues that students may have, is that, oh, no, you don't correct those, because then you would be eradicating a lifestyle, and that's not something that you would want to do, right? That you would essentially be you would want to try to get rid of something, and that's not what we should be doing. But at any rate, that's kind of the point that we're at right now with this. So I want to kind of bring this in here, and I'm going to jump in on this, and I wanted to get through this as quickly as I could. So I will tell you up front that I don't have all of the information. I know some stuff has been shared with me kind of as I've been online here and going through this, and so I may go back and even issue some other opinions on this as I read more through the background. But I just want to kind of address what I saw. So in this group on Facebook that I'm a part of, it's geared towards parents. And parents, this has been really awesome to see. Really awesome to see. Since the pandemic has really kind of changed the game in terms of parental, kind of what's the word I'm looking for? The way that parents have been engaged and involved in school. It's awakened a sleeping giant. It's always funny because when I started in education, a lot of veteran teachers used to say, oh, we can't get parental involvement. We can't get parents to get involved in their kids' education. They're just kind of absent. They turn the keys over to us to do. And in some ways, I'm critical of that myself, especially in my book. I talk about the fact that, parents need to take a more active role in their children's education. And we're seeing that a lot. Now, what's funny is a lot of those same educators who were begging for it, what it's revealing is they only wanted them in a certain way, right? They didn't want the criticism. They didn't want the analysis and the critiques and the things of that nature. What they really wanted was support. That's all they wanted. They just wanted parents to support what they were doing in the classroom. And now that there's some pushback, and really honestly, I don't know that a ton of it has necessarily even been directed toward teachers, at least not initially. A lot of it was directed at the school boards, right, and the administration. But now I think we're starting to see some of that trickle down into teachers in regards to critical race theory, and oh, it's not being taught, but it is being taught, and it doesn't really matter what you think, parents. When the bell rings, we're going to close the door and we're going to do what we want to do. So now that is kind of boiling down to the individual teacher level. But at any rate, it has been great to see parents become more awakened and engaged in what is going on. This is the accountability that school districts need. And the ultimate accountability, and I talked about this on my last video, where I talked specifically about CRT and what to look for. As parents, you're hearing all this back and forth. It is, it isn't, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do what I want, blah, blah, blah. Here's what you can look for. But this has been, really, really exhilarating to see parents, holding schools accountable, because that's who they should be accountable to, the parents, right? And you're really starting to see too some of these attitudes boil to the surface, right? And this has always been there. I've always heard this behind the scenes in the lunchrooms with teachers, right? We're the professionals. We're the ones that have gone through 4 years of schooling, 6 years of schooling. We've been to the professional development. We know the pedagogy. We know the best practices. We know all of this stuff. We're the experts. Leave us alone and let us do our job. And that attitude is starting to really come forward even more now that parents are pushing back a little bit. And all that I've really seen, and again, I know there's, hey, some people are being too aggressive with it. Some people are going over the line. And I will never, I will never say that I agree with that, but just simply asking questions, holding, school corporations accountable for the curriculum. I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't see anything wrong with a parent asking for justification on why you're doing things the way that you're doing them, or why are you using these resources, or tell me how you're teaching my child about this content or these concepts. That's absolutely every right of a parent to do that. So at any rate, parental involvement is at an all-time high. Couple that with what's going on with SEL, CRT, and COVID-19, and what you've got is this kind of perfect storm or recipe for parents to raise the alarm bell, cause of concern. Hey, we ought to look at alternatives. And that, I would say, again, I want to echo this, is the ultimate check that parents have on a school system. You can attend school board meetings, absolutely fine. I agree with that 100%. Keep school boards honest. You can write letters to administrators, absolutely fine. You can demand meetings. You can communicate with teachers. All that's absolutely fine, right? But all along the way, if it is not to your satisfaction, if you feel uncomfortable, your ultimate veto power is to withdraw that student from the school. You still have that power. And listen, guys, we cannot take that for granted. Prior to right around the time that COVID started really sink in, there were a number of academics at a very high level, by the way, who were starting to question the autonomy of parents. And you're going to hear some of that in this educator's response as well. And to even call for a banning on homeschooling, right? Because there are some that see that as dangerous. And that's really the crux. That's the battle here that we're fighting right here and now, is what autonomy and authority do you have as a parent, as a family, versus the school, right? And this is why the absolute solid claim that I make is why issues like SEL, social emotional learning, and CRT, critical race theory, are so important for parents to understand, because educators will try to cloak it as, hey, educating the whole child, we get kids with all this baggage, we've got to, make, something out of nothing, and, all of the different cliches that get used. But here's the problem. You give that little sliver, you open that door just a little bit, and they will take that and they will abuse that power. So what they will initially justify as, a good thing, beneficial to the kid or the kids in general, even those who are in a good spot in their education, that power can be used in a very negative way. And that is what I started to see happening, right? Where it started off as like, hey, we have kids who have issues managing their behaviors, managing their emotions. They get worked up very easily. And when that happens, whereas maybe somebody at this level may get upset but internalize a lot of it, Johnny gets upset and he starts chucking things at the teacher or starts cursing or harming other students or whatever. So we got to have SEL to teach Johnny how to not go from 0 to 10, but maybe go from 0 to 5, and then acknowledge and recognize where you're, starting to creep up and how to come back down, right? So that was what it was all kind of rooted in, right? And justified as why we need to do this. But then it started to be messaging like, hey, you've got a really bad home life. Tell me a little bit about that. And now all of a sudden the school is playing the role as, mandated reporters to then interject into family affairs. And again, in a known situation where there's abuse and things like that going on, sure, nobody's going to say, oh, we shouldn't be aware of that and we shouldn't act on that, right? But I have personally been told stories where that power it's been an overreach. I'll just say that, right? Where one little thing was misconstrued, or maybe somebody took too many liberties with what they thought was going on. And all of a sudden a call to CPS, and now you've got people knocking at your door. You've got phone calls being made. You've got paperwork being started. And this whole notion of the school supplanting the parent is extremely dangerous, and one thing that we should absolutely be on our guard about. And that is what I got in this exchange here on Facebook in this group that I'm a part of. And so somebody shared this in the parent group, and I started reading it. It was a so-called educator who I don't believe is actually even a teacher anymore. I believe he works for a consulting company now, but claims to have all this experience. And again, I know some information was shared with me, so I don't have the entire background of this, but it was very clear from reading his response to the member of this group that he was trying to school her, for lack of a better term, on what it's like for educators in school. So I want to kind of just break some of this down here and give a rebuttal from somebody who's been in that classroom as well, who has maybe a little bit different perspective. And so he kind of starts this off by, trying to give the impression that schools meet the needs of children no matter where they are. He says your kids go to school and teachers meet their needs whatever they are. So I want to pause right there and say, no, they don't. That's just not a true statement. Now, you can make that claim and you can feel that is the case, because I know one of the things that I call them statists, right, or pro-public education advocates will do is that they'll give you this mantra, oh, we have to educate everybody. We have to take everybody. Well, no, you don't. First and foremost, no, you don't. Quit lying. You can reject students who are dangerous to the student body, who are not in a good place to be in the building. So this notion that you have to take every kid is an absolute myth. That doesn't happen. Second, you don't meet the needs of every kid. And I've got data in my book that supports that. I'm not going to go through it all right now. You can look at it yourself. You can go online and you can look at the CDC. You can look at what other clinical psychologists are saying. You can look at test scores. You can look at reading scores and reading levels. There's all kinds of data points out there to show you that you're not meeting the needs of every student, no matter where they're at. You may feel that way, right? But that doesn't mean that is true. So that's first and foremost. He goes on to say, you don't have a say in what your kid needs despite what you think you control. And again, right there, you see and hear that attitude, right? You sense that attitude from this educator, that they are superior to the parent and that they have the answers that parents don't have. And he goes on in a lot of this diatribe that he provides to really rail on, in particular, and you can see his agenda from this, that he's railing on parents who aren't supportive of children who may be showing tendencies of an alternative sex life, right? So those who are gay and lesbian or transgender, I don't know if that was, I don't remember off the top of my head if that particular one, I know he used sexual orientation to say, look, here is somebody who may have inklings that they are gay, and the way in which you as a parent suppress that is dangerous. And then kind of goes on to talk about the role of the school in helping children to be more comfortable with who they are, and how SEL and CRT, and here are the words that he uses, right? CRT and intersectionality, which is a kind of a part of that, bringing different people in society together, right? So like that's what intersectionality means. He says the reason those are being championed by educators is because educators are on the front line seeing the impact of racism, sexism, and bad parenting each and every day, which of course he doesn't define. He implies what it means, but he can't define what that means, right? But he doesn't, and he doesn't say anything about the role of the school in this as well, right? And that's what I want to kind of point out here. So to this educator, Mr. Berg, surely you know from your time in schools the role that the school plays in harming children. Certainly you can wake up and feel okay with yourself knowing that there are children each and every day who are shuffled off to their local school, who are broken down by bullies inside that school, which, by the way, not only comes from other students, but from educators as well. There's a lot of data out there to suggest that kids receive a tremendous amount of bullying from other educators. And surely you feel okay knowing that you are a part of that system, that you continue to promote a system that does that to children. And certainly you feel okay with putting children into a compulsive system that tells them there are failures, that breaks them down into data points, that tracks them, that crams them into rooms and strips them of their curiosity and their love and desire to want to learn. Surely you're okay with that, right? Because you've told us in this passage how you're so powerful, how you do so much to empower children through SEL curriculum, and how you're this Superman that can take these kids in under your wing and right the ship because of bad parenting and because of bad home lives. Yet you've done absolutely nothing to accept part of the blame that schooling has in wrecking these kids. And surely you feel okay with that. I wouldn't know that because you didn't bring that up in your diatribe that you posted online to a parent who has the autonomy, who has the authority to see what is best for their child. Not you. No educator should ever, ever have the right to look at another child and determine how they should be raised and how they should feel, no matter what situation you think is appropriate. That should never happen. The school should never, ever supplant the family. There are other services in our society, sir, that take care of children who are being abused, who take care of children who are in really bad situations. And I might suggest that if you are that passionate about wanting to help children out who are in those situations, that you might enlist your services into an organization that would be of the benefit to those children. The church being one of those, the Boys and Girls Club being one of those, the YMCA being one of those, and other organizations. The school is not the parent and should never be the parent. We should never promote a situation where we are allowing a government institution to be a de facto parent. That can never happen. Our society is built on the familiar structure. The most sacred institution in our society is the family, no matter how dysfunctional it is. And you are in no position, regardless of your credentials, sir, to tell anybody what their family should and should not do. Just as I, as a straight white Christian male, have no right to tell my neighbor how they should raise their children. I am there to love them and support them. And as an educator, I am there to listen to my students and give them the guidance that I think is right. But I am in no authority to tell somebody else how they should be living their lives. And so for you to come on and attack another person who has the best interest of their children in mind, and to try to make it seem as though you are some enlightened person that is a part of some organization that is charitable and kind and loving, when over 150 years of data suggests that our school system is the most radical experience ever known to any society. The fact that we force compulsive through the point of a gun, right? Quite literally, truancy, cops coming to your home and telling you, where are your children? They need to be in school. That we force children into these schools that absolutely destroy their love of learning, their desire to want to learn, their creativity. You share no responsibility in that. Where is that in your enlightened response here, sir? Surely you're willing to take some of the responsibility for that. I am. I was a part of it, but I woke up to it. I realized what I was doing. I realized what the American schooling system was doing to children, and I wanted no more part of it. And I will tell you, as an educator and as a parent of two children who are both in this school system, that I, as a parent, will always protect and defend my rights over that of an educator any day of the week. Any day of the week, in terms of how I raise my child, the moral and ethical code that I instill in my child. My rights as a parent are paramount to what you think is right. And parents that are listening to this, those of you that are a part of the group that I'm referring to, and those that are catching this online, I hope that you take that responsibility seriously. And I hope that as this school year begins, and as you start to awaken more to what is going on inside of our buildings each and every day, that you would do this in the appropriate manner. Again, we have to make sure that we're doing it that way. We have to make sure that we're using dialogue. We have to make sure that we are keeping an open mind. We can't resort to name calling. We can't resort to mudslinging. We can't resort to threats. That stuff's off limits. But that does not dismiss the fact that you have every right to be able to hold teachers and school systems accountable to educating your child the way that you see fit. And if that's not being met, you have that ultimate veto. You have every right to withdraw from that school. And the positive thing with all this, whereas maybe a year or two ago, your options might have been limited in what you could do, they're opening more and more every day. Every single day, there are more and more options that are coming to the forefront to combat parents who feel trapped inside of having to rely on the traditional model for educating their children. And so I would highly encourage you to educate yourself on that. Look at options that are available in your community. It doesn't have to be homeschool. It doesn't even have to be private school. There are many, many other options that are beginning to come to the surface in terms of options and alternatives to educating our children. And there is nothing that I have seen in my time in over a decade in the classroom that I think makes the public school system superior to any other method. It may be unorthodox. It may not be what others think it should look like. Who cares? You know, these people that claim that they have all the answers and that we need to, you know, I hear this all the time. Teachers say, oh, we've got to have an educated citizenry to uphold our democracy. Well, look where we are. Look how long we've had compulsory school. We've got kids who can't read. We've got kids that can't do math. We got kids that can't think critically. We have kids who are panicking out of their mind as they graduate from high school, not knowing what to do, that are being shoveled off to college because now we're telling them, hey, a high school degree or diploma is no longer acceptable. You have to have college. And so there's pressure now for them to go into that avenue, and they're going into thousands of dollars of debt. They're anxious, they're worried, they're frustrated. This school system, this compulsory school system is a major, major part of that. So anything that you can do to remove yourself from that, to strip yourself from that, I think it's a win. So be emboldened, be empowered, educate yourself, prepare yourself as you go into these, not confrontations, maybe they will be, but remember to keep your composure, keep your cool, stay on point. Don't let the emotion build up to where you distract from what the main purpose is. That's easy to do, because when I read that last night, there were a lot of thoughts running through my mind that I wanted to come on here and say, but then I was like, look, stick to the point. Stick to the point, because the facts are there. The truth is there, right? That's the reality of the situation. And I would open challenge any person who is a believer in the public school system, who's a believer in compulsory education, to a debate, to an open exchange of ideas. If you feel so confident in what you are a part of, and you are so vehemently opposed to what I and other parents are engaged in, let's have a debate. Let's talk about this, right? Let's put it out there for everybody to hear, for everybody to see the information and the data. That'll help them maybe make up their mind about what they want to do. But for this individual to attack a parent the way that they did is completely uncalled for. It's that bully mentality that I talked about. And again, guys, you can find all kinds of information out there about what children go through on a daily basis that school is directly, not indirectly, directly accountable to, in terms of what it has done psychologically, emotionally to our children. And it's not, some of it is home life. I get that. But if you discount the role that schools are playing, you're turning a blind eye to it. And that's just not fair. It's just simply not fair to not acknowledge the role that school plays in developing where these children are in life. And I could make the equal claim that we are having to combat what you're doing here at home. That when my kids come home from school, they are bringing home ideas, lifestyles, and other things that we don't agree with. Okay, so I could take your argument and flip it around on you and tell you, justify that. Tell me why putting kids into classrooms of 20 to 25 to 30 kids and moving them around throughout the building throughout the day, tell me how that's a good idea. Tell me how that invokes the love of learning. Tell me how that helps them to flourish. You can't do it. So again, parents, when you come across this kind of thing, prepare yourself, research, look for the data, look for the information that's out there, because this kind of thing cannot be accepted, both within the profession and within the communities that we're a part of, because this person is a community member. They live somewhere. They're a part of a community. We can't allow this kind of attitude and thinking to win the day. I mean, he's entitled to believe what he wants to believe. Doesn't mean he's right. Doesn't mean he can't have pushback. Doesn't mean there shouldn't be pushback on it. And that's also, too, by the way, pushback is not the same as, being shouted down or bullied or harassed or doxxed or whatever. That's not the same thing. You put yourself out there with these opinions, you're going to have pushback. And that's why I said it's important to stick to being on point so that we don't go down that path of doing the same thing that they are doing. All right. I hope that helped. Again, guys, I would highly encourage you to immerse yourself in data. Look for some of the people that I referenced at the beginning of this video who were influential on me. Of course, there are many, many others out there. who are doing fantastic work that I can't even name everyone right now. Ken Danford is one. Blake Bowles is another one. I mentioned Carrie McDonald, read John Taylor Gatto. Dr. Peter Gray out of Boston College is another fantastic read. It talks a lot about the psychology of children and the way that they learn and what schools do. There's many others. Just educate yourself, and if I can pass along any information, I'd be more than happy to do that. But prepare yourself, because the battle lines are being drawn, and once schools start up here in the coming weeks, I can definitely see this only intensifying. So please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Thank you guys so much for following along today. I do have my podcast show, if you're interested in catching any of that, entitled They Never Taught Me That. I do that along with a colleague of mine who I used to teach with. We go through content in the social studies and go through the way in which schools teach them. And then we go through the stuff that gets left out, the narratives, the information, and that kind of thing. So it's kind of a lighthearted, fun conversation that we have each week, where we help fill in the gaps on that. You can find that channel on Facebook. We have a Facebook page called They Never Taught Me That. The podcast episodes are available on Google and Apple, so you can find both of those there by just searching They Never Taught Me That. And then also run a website called edfailure.com, where you can find previous articles that I've written, copies of my book, the link to the book on Amazon. Failure, the History and Results of America's School System is up there. Probably looking at having Letdown ready by the beginning of 2022. We got about a first draft done, getting through some editing and whatnot on that. So you can be on the lookout for that as well. And again, always looking forward to feedback, comments, suggestions, and things of that nature. So thank you so much. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.